AHLPSN this week. Live again on a Friday after Week 7. It's amazing that we're already at that point right now, Week 7. 2 more left to go, and things are shaping up. And we're here to talk about everything that happened in Week number 7 and what we expect coming up. Talk a little bit about the trades that have gone on and how they've fared, how some of the teams are faring in the playoff race right now. That's all coming up here in about a couple of seconds. So, gentlemen, again, good evening. Vibes, Dead Soul, how you guys doing today?
Wonderful.
Good, thank you.
You sound like it.
Today?
You awake this time, Dead Soul?
I'm good. I'm good today.
Okay.
It's been a good week.
Was it?
You know what, how are you, Sibs? We never ask how you are. How are you doing?
You don't care.
You always ask us. We never ask you.
You don't care. You really don't care.
No, I really do. No, really, I care.
I'm okay. Windows updated my PC, so when I thought I was really early for the show, I'm working right up into the last second to get everything working for this stupid update, which totally screwed up all my software. But other than that, I'm doing fine.
It's like surprise butt sex Windows, you know? Surprise butt sex.
Okay.
Well, you've never had surprise butt sex?
I would think that would be a little more of a surprise. And actually, I'm probably a little more angry about Windows giving me problems than if that happened.
Than butt sex.
You know, I thought we were going to try and be good. What the hell happened to that discussion?
Yeah, no, you're right.
All
you
right.
always ask someone before you do butt sex. Never surprise them.
Yeah. That's probably a good idea. Probably, and if it's your wife, I would get it in writing. Probably.
Except for her, don't ask. No, okay. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know where you're going with this. I really don't. Dead Soul, how was your trade deadline last week? I know that you were you came on later on in the show on Sunday, but we never really got a chance to talk to you about what you were dealing with Winnipeg and how things were. We asked a little bit about how the trade deadline went in the NHL, but how was your own experience with that?
Well, I mean, I wanted to make a few other moves, specifically maybe for a couple of our players that I felt that deserved to, try and at least have a chance at the playoffs since we're no longer in that category for the season. Unfortunately, it's been a pretty rough season, and I did want to try and at least get some guys onto another team just to see if they could help those teams out. But at the same time, I needed to try and help our team out as well. And, I still would like to try and win some games. And, we kind of had an outside chance of catching up, but it really mathematically wasn't there. So I don't want to just give everything away for free. I wasn't really offered what I thought was fair for some of these players. I think I was being lowballed a little too much. And, I really needed to have some picks and stuff like that. And I just felt like, you know what, at this point, if I'm not getting the picks I want, I'll keep the players with us. They had said that they'd be fine with staying, and they play their games, and they show up, so it was okay. But yeah, it would have been nice to make a few more moves, also to just help us out in a way. But ultimately, the moves that I did make, or the move that I made, I guess, did actually help us, and I'm happy with that at least.
So we're going to talk about a few things this week. One of them is, of course, about after the trade deadline, 1 week later. How did some of these teams fare? Some of the ones that we talked about on Sunday, obviously we did talk a little bit about the Sens and all the moves they made in the light of changing in the management area. So we'll talk about a couple of different teams, including them. We're going to look
Iowa
over.
was pretty active too.
Yes. We're going to go over a little bit over the league standings, look at each of the divisions, and talk about a few different teams who may be hot. And certainly, I think we're going to have to get a Hartford update after all the discussion we had last week and how things fared with them this week. I think we owe it to the fans to circle back and take a look at this again. And not a good week for Hartford. We'll get on that in a few minutes. And we'll talk about all the divisions, and then if we have any time, we'll talk a little bit about the All-Star voting. But quite honestly, I got to be honest with the rest of the fans. I know that they're probably probably have done all their voting already, but I really haven't paid much attention to it. So I honestly don't even know who's in the lead. We'll maybe we'll take a look at it later. But the All-Star game, to me, it's nice to recognize the guys, but, it's in this part of the season vibes, it's probably, as a manager, the last thing you give a damn about at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I care because I'd like to see, my guys get their due. And I feel like, I mean, I've been a little upset the way the All-Star voting has gone. I mean, I think that maybe the general public should have gotten like a one collective vote or something like that, and to add that to the committee or something to that effect. But I mean, it's basically whoever sent out the most dick pics is getting the vote. So
That's usually Pasta, isn't it?
yeah, probably.
Yeah. He's popular for a few reasons. It's not just his gameplay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know. That's the sentiment that a lot of people have had. So, I'm not. It's kind of that way. But in a lot of other sports, it's that way too. It's a popularity contest.
Yeah. That's true.
And you're hoping that the GM's nominations will kind of weed out the general populace voting somebody in who doesn't belong there.
Yeah.
So we'll take a look at that, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of deserving guys on that. Let's talk a little bit post-trade. The early winners and losers right now, from what we've seen. I don't know if I've seen anybody really make out like a bandit on the trade deadline. The Sens made a lot of moves, and we'll talk about those, but it really didn't affect their record much. The teams that had a problem this week weren't teams that were, there weren't teams that were doing great and then made some trades that screwed them up. I don't even know if the trade deadline has really meant an awful lot to anybody just yet, vibes.
Well, I mean, I know that Iowa was pretty active, and they had a mediocre week. Probably one of their not so great weeks. I mean, not terrible, nothing catastrophic, but they were a team that was pretty active and kind of par for the course, I guess you could say. Same thing with Binghamton. They were pretty active at the trade deadline, and I mean, they had a decent week. I believe at one point they were like 7-1 on the week, and then they lost a few at the end. So a good week, yes, for many teams, but didn't really. I felt like it didn't hurt them as bad as I thought it might have, but it didn't really help them as much as they may have thought. So again, just kind of status quo there.
Dead Soul, how do from what you understand of everything that's going on in the AHL so far? Did you did you see anybody really make out on the trade deadline last week and really affect them so far after 1 week?
Well, honestly, nothing's really kind of jumped out at me so far. I think the teams that needed to make the trades that they did made, for the most part. I think the teams or the trades that would have helped them ultimately, like we mentioned, there was some guys showing up on, potential ECU usage, for example, just that kind of thing.
Right.
I think that's a lot of what these trades kind of ended up being. I don't really see any trade in particular that kind of jumps out as like this blockbuster that has changed the whole tide of where this certain team is going. But I think maybe some holes were filled with certain teams. But no specific team at this moment really kind of jumps out at me in terms of those trades that kind of went down. I think maybe after next week we might see maybe something that might catch our eye. But right now, to me, there's nothing that really stands out.
Go ahead, Bob.
I will admit I am getting this from the chat on YouTube, and I'm only saying it because I do kind of agree. You could make a case for Utica. They picked up Slick Rick around the trade deadline. Actually, I think it was on trade deadline day, and they had a really good week. How much of that is attributed to Slick Rick? He went 3-0. So
yeah.
I guess you can certainly credit him with a little bit. So
yeah,
they're
sure.
a team that has benefited from the deadline.
Yeah, and we can even talk about Utica right now. I mean, certainly that's a trade that made a difference. But you look at some of the other guys, and let's just talk about Utica. 8-1, week 7, 5-1 in the division. Winning 8 straight, by the way, losing the first game on Sunday night. But look at, if you look at some of the stats too, look at a goaltender who's been pretty solid and showing big numbers this past week. I call So What, 55, 5-0 record, 80.9 save percentage, a 2.6 goals against average. That's a big difference. Getting 68 shots on goal in those games. Ito, or Jopo, as you may know him, 3-0. Anthony D, 3-0. Rakasu, 3-0. Achi back on defense, 3-0. A lot of guys produced this past week. Jopo, 6 goals, 3 assists, in that week. Anthony D, 4 goals, 5 assists. So there were a lot of guys who played well. It was not one guy from a trade. It was a lot of players on this team that played well this past week, and it's sort of what I expected from these guys. And they had a little bit of an issue for a week or two, not playing up to their potential, because I really felt like, if you look at their roster, they just have a ton of talent there. I just mentioned some of the guys on this team, and even mentioned G-Pig, who, also another solid player. This is a really good roster, and it's one that I think can really be a problem for a lot of teams in that division, and if they were to move on, could absolutely be a spoiler in this one.
Yeah, I mean, they've had a solid roster all season, and it's not that Slick Rick came in and just carried the team to a really good week, but
Right.
I'm sure that the trade still benefited the team. But yeah, as you're saying, I mean, overall the team had a really solid week, and they've really been pretty good all season. I think they had one little divot there right before the trade deadline, but definitely a team that may be overlooked by some and could end up, like you say, moving on.
Yeah, and sometimes just adding that one piece can really make a huge difference to lines in that way,
Right.
because you can spread things out, and
Yep.
you can kind of complete that one line that might have been missing something. And if it's that scoring that you needed in that line, and having that one guy slide in and be able to provide that will really help solidify each line. If you can balance it out nicely, which it looks like they've done. I mean, going on an 8-win streak kind of tells you right there that they've really got it together, and now they just got to kind of keep this flow going and make sure that they go into the last couple of weeks strong like this, and they can actually potentially get up to take over that Binghamton spot there at third potentially.
Yeah. A lot of times you don't realize it, but a lot of times, you make a trade and you add one player into the roster, and there's this sort of like trickle down phenomenon, you know what I mean? That takes place throughout the entire lineup, and it's that one trade which gives you a little bit of added movement in the roster, and it can really do great things for a team. So yeah, you could definitely be onto something with that.
We all know that's especially true when that one person could potentially have been that team cancer that's been bringing everybody down, which does have that kind of ripple effect as well in a negative way.
Yep, yeah, for sure.
Iowa made a lot of moves too, and picking up some good players, including Vish B, and we looked at that last week or on Sunday at least, and we said, okay, that's this is a trade that the Sens made, and they got some players back that they liked. I think Aegis was part of that trade, but they gave up a guy like Vish to the Wild, and Iowa pretty active last week, which I think kind of surprised us all. Again, going with that theory that doing a lot of work on a team that was successful, but I hate to make you feel good here, Vibes, but I almost wonder if Iowa was feeling Manitoba breathing down their neck and felt like, we've got one chance now. If we think we're in good shape, we've got one chance right now before the deadline to try and strengthen our team. And I think they made some good moves. They not only picked up Vish, but Roller Pig was in an earlier deal. So, they did some really good work to get their team in better shape. But it didn't, so far, it didn't really show up that way. For Iowa. In their last 10, they are 5-5, but this past week 5-4, a couple of losses, one to you guys on Sunday night, 4-2, and then losing to Cleveland, which is not a big surprise again because Cleveland's doing so well. but getting beaten by Grand Rapids 6-3, which the Griffins are a really good team, but Iowa just having a rough time with some of the better teams in the division. And after the trade deadline vibes, I think if I'm them, I have to say, okay, well, hopefully this is not a harbinger of things to come, because this is not an easy division. And if we're having trouble with our division foes now, even after the trade deadline, we got to change something. We got to figure out what to do differently to stay with these guys, because they had a little problem this week.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they felt us breathing down their neck, and now they're eating our anyway. But I mean, they made the move for Vish, and Vish had 14 points on this week. I mean, he had a really good showing. He had 4 goals and 10 assists, and he went 3-0. But I mean, I feel like if anything, this problem stemmed from even prior to the trade deadline. You know, I feel like they kind of had to make a few moves at the deadline because of things that they did earlier, previous to the trade deadline. Because the way this roster was, I mean, I felt like they were destined for kind of mediocrity anyway. And now with the trades, yeah, maybe their personnel is a little bit better, but to shake things up this much, you know, this frequently, this often, it's just not. I don't know. It's a different style. You know what I mean? Like, everyone does things differently, and every manager does things differently. And I mean, sure, you can find success doing things like this, but it's not what I would do. You know, I always try to keep my moves minimal and early. And you know, they're just kind of treading water right now, right? I mean, they're not really doing too much. Maybe, if anything, maybe even sinking a little bit.
And yeah, I mean, a tough week for them. You know, just talk a little bit about who they picked up. And Vish this past week, going 3-0, 4 goals, 10 assists. He is a plus 14 on the week. So, you know, he did his part. He came over and did what he needed to do in this past week's games for the Wild. And you know, they beat the teams that they needed to beat, but they struggled with the teams that they're going to wind up having to get past in order to go far in the playoffs. And so, you know, what Iowa does at this point, there's really, you know, that's the whole thing about this trade deadline, guys. Every team is at a point right now where there's not a whole hell of a lot they can do. You know, what do you do if you maybe have a veteran or an amateur? Do you throw somebody, you know, on waivers or try and bring somebody up? I mean, you almost have to go with the guys that you have right now, and hope that they produce. There's not a whole hell of a lot you can do now.
Yeah,
And well, actually, you can't do anything. You're actually totally locked in. The only way, from what I understand, is, you know, if there's a shakeup in the NHL and someone gets sent down and you're above roster, or, you know, with conditional waivers, there's really not much you can do. You're basically locked in. If you have a little bit of wiggle room with waiver exempt players, now the only players that are going to be waiver exempt on an AHL roster are draft picks, because, you know, there is no such thing as having a prospect on your roster. So, you know, there's really very, very, very little wiggle room at all. So, you know, unless a player goes totally inactive or something like that, you're locked into your roster, and you had a chance before the deadline to do something about it, and if you didn't, well, now you got to deal with whatever you've done. So
yeah, and that's where line shuffling can come into play. Obviously, I mean, that has its positives and negatives, because it's not always something that will work for you in your favor. Oftentimes, it usually won't at this late in the game, especially when you've had, you know, certain guys playing together as often as possible. And maybe that's not the case. I'm pretty sure they've been pretty steady, though, with their lines from the looks of it. But I mean, that is one option that you can do. It's pretty much one of the few options, other than practicing, obviously, with your teammates. But I mean, you know, we all know this is the last 2 weeks coming up here, and they're going to be going up against everybody in their division again. So they're really going to have to make sure to put their best out during that last week, and then obviously for next week, where they're going to be facing some tough teams as well. It looks like they're going to be facing up against the Eastern North. So that's not going to be an easy week either. Those teams are all looking to solidify their spots and try and jump a couple other teams as well. So that's going to be a real good test And at this point, everybody needs to be playing that playoff style hockey and get ready for the playoffs for these teams that are actually in that position.
Now's the time to be hitting your stride, right? Like this is
Absolutely.
the time of the year where you need to be hitting your stride.
Yeah, you can't
We
have
all
any
talk
excuses.
about, yeah, right. I mean, we all talk about, the week doesn't start till week 3 or week 4 or whatever the case may be, and that's all fine and good. And yeah, but that's just the start. But now this is the time where you need to be hitting the ramp. You know what I mean? If you're not taking off right now, if you're trending downward, you could be in trouble. No, I mean the playoffs haven't started yet, and there still are 2 weeks. There's 2 full weeks, but I think that week 7 is a really good indication of the way things are going for you.
Yeah, the mentality of a team should be playoffs right now. Everybody should be
Yeah,
playing that playoff style hockey. Otherwise, you're not going to be prepared for it.
yeah. I mean, I know that with my team in particular, every single day, if someone asks, when did the playoffs start? When did the playoffs start? When did the playoffs start? Because they're ready to go. That's the only thing that my team is thinking about right now
Right.
is the playoffs. They can't wait for the regular season to be over because they want the playoffs to start. And that should be the mindset of really every player on every team.
Sure.
Let's get back to a couple of teams that we were talking about, and one of them that we mentioned last week, and we mentioned at the top of the show here, is the Binghamton Senators, who made a bunch of moves. Kostom took over the team and has done some work over the trade deadline period to try and change some things up. Brought in some guys that he felt that he wanted to have on his team. And, again, team playing well, solid. Why do you make a lot of moves? And I think some of it was to help out Ottawa, I'm sure, but it also could be a lot about who he's comfortable with and who he wants on his team that he feels can gel and get more more cohesive lines together. But the question is, they wind up doing the right thing, and there's anyone can speculate until we see what happens with them in the long term this season, but 6-3 this week, which really isn't any different than what they've done any other week. The last two this week were losses to Utica and Toronto. So again, two of the better teams in the league, and they struggled with them. Week 5 really was their worst week, where they went 2-7. They played every game with at least one ECU, lost 2 of them on forfeits. This was all before Full Melt wound up getting banned and suspended. So every other week basically has been 6-3, 7-2. So nothing's really changed with the Sens, and to this point, we don't know if these trades have really hurt or helped the team. It's gonna, this is the case where we need to see what they do the rest of the season and where they go in the playoffs before we make any determination that this has been a smart move for them.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing I'll say here too is that, I feel how I feel, and it's not going to change anything. Despite the fact that they didn't like completely implode this week, doesn't change how I feel. And just like I said that Be Nice and the Wild may have made a few needs out of kind of a necessity, so to speak. I don't feel like there was that same necessity with Binghamton, and I feel like they just made a whole bunch of moves willy nilly, just because, whether it was to get a few friends in there or, whatever the case may be. And regardless of what, I mean, if it helps them, it helps them, and good for you. I'm happy, and it's a good thing, and you ended up not completely shitting the bed. But that doesn't change the fact that I don't like it. I would never just completely go off the reservation and just start, quick firing trades at the trade deadline. It's just not the way to do it. And, ultimately, I still stand strong in the fact that I think that this probably eventually hurts them a little bit. Um, I didn't really like a lot of the trades that they made. I mean, they weren't terrible. They weren't egregiously like, oh my God, this is just ridiculously awful. But I don't feel like there was any like vast improvement, and ultimately, I don't like it, and I don't think it helps them that much. And their record this week kind of echoes that same sentiment, and it says that they're kind of status quo and haven't really done anything too spectacular. So why even make the moves?
One of the guys they picked up, Jay's M8, already has been banned for 3 seasons for, I don't think he signed up for any games or he didn't show up. It was all that. Aegis came in to help out. He went 2-0-1, 3 goals, 6 assists, a +3. Speedy Dog 1-1-1. The Shoe Money 0-0-2. These are all guys who came in trades this past week. Jamin
Well,
Callis 1-1-1.
Jay's mate was because of Vesna being called up, so he wasn't a
Right.
trade. He was
Right.
just a call up because Vesna got brought up to the NHL, so they brought up Jay's mate.
Barakov 2-0-1, +4 back on defense. B Braves, who we saw get moved a couple of times, 1-1-1 this past week. So guys played okay. Triple M demo 2-0-1. So got some good play out of them, but so far for the guys that came over as part of trades. And have played this past week. Decent numbers, but nothing out of the ordinary. So, it was again, we're not going to know about this DS. This is one of those trades where it wasn't improving a team that was really bad that all of a sudden now is 6-3-7-2. It's kept a good team rolling on.
Yeah, I mean they did, they lost their GM as we know, and they had a bunch of send ups, and I think they did things out of necessity, obviously, as we know. Ultimately, to still be able to pull off the week that they did and do how they're doing and kind of keep their position more or less where they are, and still be within a comfortable spot of being able to at least take that second place and even catch up and go to first. They have the ability to do so. Do they have the personnel to do that? I don't know. Ultimately, I think what they did helped their team, and we can just wait until the next week to see how that's going to fare out in the long term here, the last couple of weeks of this season. But I think they did okay, personally.
Start taking a look around at the league standings and the divisions. We'll take a look at the East right now just to get an idea of what's going on there. As you see, Hershey still on top of the Eastern Atlantic, 81 points, nice lead. Still on Hartford, but of course Lehigh Valley and Bridgeport and Springfield right close behind, only a couple of points separating each one of them. And Providence certainly not out of it either at this point, the way things are going on. But Hartford, as you know, hit the skids a little bit this week. And again, we'll talk more about them, but Hershey still with a pretty solid lead on them. Bears going 6-3 for week 7. Win versus Syracuse. Really the only one of note. They only played 3 teams that were above 500. Only scored 4.2 goals per game on average this past week. Lost to the Sens and Phantoms late in the week. So a decent week for the Bears, but not the best of showings for them this week. But, in this division right now, the way 2, 3, 4, and 5 are battling, they don't really need to be fantastic every week. They are doing just enough of what they need to do at this point, Vibes.
Yeah, and it's the class of the division. I think they're the only team in this division who could maybe contend with teams from other divisions. And yeah, sure, they may not be the absolute best, but they're a solid team, and they're ran by some good people. They got some really good players on that squad over there. Decent defense, really, really solid offense, good goaltending and Moose. And I think they reestablished themselves as the obvious cream of the crop in this division.
Yeah, they can certainly hold their own with the other teams, like you've said, some of the tougher teams in the other divisions here. I mean, they're going to be having a pretty good test going up against the Western Pacific again, to get them ready for the playoffs and the kind of teams that they're going to have to be ready to be able to play and beat. So I mean, but I mean, they've had quite a great season in a mediocre division, as we all know, and having all these teams really right behind them. Well, not right behind them, but I should say, we have Hartford obviously in second there, and like you mentioned there, Sibs, that all these other teams are just behind them by just a few points here, and it's really up for grabs that whole rest of the division. So it's really going to be interesting to see how this kind of plays out. Um, I know I'm kind of going a little off topic of the Bears, but I mean, I know we're going to get to it shortly here, but I mean, we're obviously going to start talking about this Wolfpack that I know that Vibes has been claiming not to be who they are, and I think this week has kind of pointed that out, that maybe perhaps that's the case. I know Vibes is probably going to get onto this a little bit and continue this a bit more, but they're not as I don't think they're as comfortable right now as they were before. I mean, this week really put them in a pretty bad position for themselves, and maybe it's shown a weakness that Vibes has been saying all along is there.
Well, let's start.
Four teams separated by 5 points in this division. Just want to put that out there. 4 teams, 5 points. It's pretty tight.
That's a very, very tight division. In that for the second place, yeah.
Let's start talking about that Hartford team.
How'd they do this week? Sorry.
Well, 1-7 pending the Scranton Wilkes-Barre, or Wilkes-Barre Scranton, however you want to say it, Pens game, which from the video of the game, which I watched because I wanted to see how, why this didn't have a score for it. The way it ended, it looked like it was a 6-3 final for the Pens. They never put a score in, still haven't. That was a game back on Monday. Lots of apparently there were a lot of lag outs, guys not able to come back in. Question of whether or not they could have come back in. I'm not going to state what has been said in the shout box. If you've been around, you might have seen some of the discussion this morning. But despite whatever's going on with that game, still not a good game, not a good week for Hartford. 4 1-goal losses. So, again, not like they're getting blown out of these games this week. They just, it is part and parcel to the way that they play. And they've had a lot of luck up to this point to be able to stay in these games and pull them out at the end. This past week, it didn't really happen for them. 127 shots on goal in a total of the 8 games that we do have stats for. That's almost 16 shots on goal per game, and that's not going to help the goaltender or the team for victory when you're peppering your goalie that much. How much on rebounds, I really couldn't tell you. But from what I saw, it was from a few games that I looked at, I don't think the defense was any different, not too much different, except that they had lapses where they just let guys right by them, and too many point blank, very clear opportunities on their goaltending, and that's part of the issue. 3 games, 3 of those games they had 20 or more shots against them. Again, never a recipe usually for victory. And the funny thing is, the opponent record for the week is well under 500, 246, 273, and 39. So they didn't play. It's not like they played a tremendously high caliber of talent this week. It just did not click for them. They did not do enough to hold other teams off on shots on goal. It got a little better late in the week. They lost to Lehigh Valley 3-2 in the final game of the week, and they only allowed 10 shots on goal. Both teams only with 10 shots on goal. And so they need to do more of that in order to stay in games. But, here's the problem. Lehigh Valley is a good team. We've been saying that. Bridgeport has talent. Springfield has talent. And Providence has made some moves, and it's possible that they could even get back into this one. Hartford may have made a big jump, Vibes, but they've got too many teams grabbing at their feet right now, trying to pull them right back down again.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to this guy I know, very nice looking young gentleman, very handsome, and he basically told me that Hartford really wasn't anything special, and that they were just living off the coattails of really, really above and beyond goaltending, and would eventually come back down to earth and reality, and be maybe about a 500 or so team. Smart guy, usually knows what he's talking about, gets basically everything right. And
It's too bad Ryan can't be
that's
here to hear you say this all about him.
it's yes, I'm definitely talking about Ryan.
Yeah.
No, but I mean seriously, I'm fooling around, but the truth of the matter is, and look, this is not a shot at Hartford. This is not me hating Hartford. This is not me not wanting Hartford to succeed or anything like that. It's just me calling it like I see it. And this was a team that was flying high because of some really out of this world goaltending. Who, I mean, the goalies are decent goalies. They're good goalies. Don't get me wrong, but they were just playing way far and above beyond their head, And I think they've come back down to life a little bit, back to reality. And this is what this team is. It's maybe a playoff team. They're in a really tight division, and if it keeps going this way, they're going to be right back where they started. They're going to be below Lehigh. They're going to be below the Thunderbirds. They're going to be below Bridgeport. And they may not make the playoffs. They might, but they may not. But that's what this team is. It's a middle of the road, barely a playoff, but a skin of their balls playoff team. And I'm not saying they can't get in. I'm not saying they're terrible, but it was just they did. They had an amazing stretch, and you can't take that away from them. They won 15 games in a row, right? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
I mean, they won 15 games in a row. I mean, who does that? My team hasn't done that all season. I don't know if there's ever been a team that's won 15 in a row. And, you got to give them the respect of that. To put that type of a run together is incredible. But in the reality of it all, it's a very mediocre team, par for the course, par team, subpar, fucking double bogey something.
Well,
It's not that great of a team.
every team has their off weeks without a doubt. I mean, we know that they had well, I mean, this whole division had struggled throughout the season at the beginning, especially. But I mean, for them to be the team that they were over the last couple of weeks, and then for this week to kind of lose against teams that you would think that they not only should beat but have to beat, um, it kind of does raise some pretty big questions. And I think next week is the biggest test ultimately for the rest of the season going on when they take on teams in the Western Pacific. So it's
For Hartford?
yeah, they
So,
take.
no, the test is over. They failed. That's it. They failed the course. Sorry.
Well, we,
Try
we know
next year.
we know exactly where you stand. But
Summer
you know what?
school. Summer school for Hartford. Going to summer
When I'm
school.
when I'm looking at some of the teams behind them, and you look at some of their team's defense, for example, like with the Phantoms. I mean, I gotta say, I mean, the Phantoms have some good players on that team, but I mean, they're being carried. I have to say it. They are being carried by Tyler so heavily. I don't think most of you would disagree with that because he's been the workout horse for that team from the beginning, and he's kept them in games that they probably should have lost.
The
And
Phantoms?
the Phantoms, yeah, I'm talking about.
They're
The
a better
Phantoms.
team, though, but they're a better team than Hartford.
I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily agree 100%
Yeah,
with that.
they are.
I
Yeah, they're a
do
better
think
team than
I
Hartford.
do think they're probably going to take that second spot overall. I think that's who I'm going to bank my money on if I was to bet on a team that's going to take any kind of who's going to take that second spot. I think it's going to be the Phantoms for sure. I do have my questions about them throughout the playoffs. I don't think they're going to go terribly far if they do make it. I'm just saying that a team like the Phantoms, they have some really good talents on the team, but they have their problems too. At least defensively, it looks like if you look at who they have on defense, or at least how they're performing thus far. But it's the big test again for this whole division comes next week, and of course, it's going to really change the course of each of these teams and where they're going to be heading into the last week. But Hartford, it's the next 2 weeks we'll see. We'll see if you're right, vibes. We'll see. But I mean, I see what you're saying. I understand it, but and you do give your respect, which is good because you should, because they have done very well.
They won 15 in a row. I mean, I've never led a team to 15 in a row. You
it's
know,
hard to do for any team in any division. So it's
yeah,
pretty amazing. It's a huge feat. So
it
that
is.
that said, it does speak to what they are capable of. Now, do they continue with anything anywhere close to that? We'll
No,
see. I don't think so. I don't think they're going to go, another 10-win streak in the next 2 weeks. If anything, with some of the teams that they're going to be facing, they'll be lucky if they hit like a 4 to 5 win streak. But we'll see. We'll see.
Hey,
yeah, I mean that. Go ahead. I'm
no,
sorry.
no, no. Go ahead, Bobs.
I was just gonna say, this division, it's so close, and like you were saying that ultimately you think what Lehigh ends up in second, and I mean, I say that Lehigh is a better team than Hartford, but the fact of the matter is, with the exception of Hershey, this division is so close that any team can end up in second, third, or fourth. But ultimately, I mean, this division is super easy to predict. I mean, well, I guess not entirely because when one plays four, so Hershey plays number 4.
Mm-hmm.
The fourth place team loses, and then 2 and 3 is a pick 'em where it's whoever whichever way the fucking wind blows that day, even though you play in an arena, is going to win that series. You know what I mean? And it's a really tight series. It's a close series. Series. What am I talking about? Division. Excuse
Well,
me.
that was going to be my next point here. Are they just deciding who's going to be first in line to go to the gallows and face Hershey?
Yeah, basically.
Is that I hate to sound
right.
vibey in here, but that's kind of that's all.
Right.
That's what you. Okay, I'm in front of you to get my head chopped off. No, I'm in front of you. It's
Yeah, exactly.
it could
No,
be
me
what
first.
it really is here. Yeah, exactly.
It's what it is. 2 and 3. You get a shot at moving on, and if you come in fourth, you're dead. So.
That's a really good point, actually. That is a good thing to bring up because
Not saying it's going to
mean-
happen, Dead Soul. I'm just saying it might. Look, Charlotte last season should prove to us that we don't know what the hell's going to happen half the time. But
yeah,
I almost feel like a lot of argument, a lot of good play between these teams, but they're just beating each other up before they head to the guillotine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
but all these teams, it's hard to call it. I shouldn't say it's an absolute for any of these teams, but
Sure.
they're so close. Like with Bridgeport and the Thunderbirds, everybody's so close together. It's going to be pretty interesting to watch, and obviously we'll see who kind of finishes in that fourth place, and I'm curious to see just how they'll actually play against the Bears because as we know, things happen and surprises can definitely take place. And like you said, Charlotte with last season there, and will we have something like that? I doubt it, but that would be pretty exciting if we did.
You never know. You never know.
Hey, just to let you
You
know,
know,
go
go ahead.
I was just going to say, just looking at the goaltenders for Hartford, Craig, D85 went 1-4-0 this week,
Yep.
75.7 save percentage, 3.6 goals against. But Navy, Nick, right? 0-2-1.
He played well though.
Save percentage, 84.9.
Yeah, he still played well.
2.6
And
goals
that-
against.
And that wasn't even enough to get it done.
No, he lost 3 1-goal games.
Yeah.
1 in overtime. So, again, they're still playing incredibly hard and played well. It's not like you could say, oh, well, Craig and Navy had an off week, so that's why they played. They had this problem.
Right.
They still played well. And Navy played outstanding.
Craig came way back down to reality.
Yeah, but still, I mean, considering the amount of shots on goal these guys got, I mean, it's yeah.
No, they still played well.
Yeah.
They did. They still played well, but even that wasn't enough to get it done. And that just
Exactly.
gives you a glimpse at, look, Hartford, listen, I don't mean this with any disrespect or anything. You had an amazing run. It was great. We all enjoyed it, honestly. But you suck. No disrespect.
That's a bit harsh, don't you think? Hey, remember this. You're making a judgment off of 1 week. Last week we made somewhat of a judgment, or I did, about Hartford.
But I'm
it
not.
Was over,
but
it
I'm
was
not.
over
That's
multiple
the thing.
weeks.
I'm not. I'm talking about the entire season.
Yeah, in the entire season they played incredibly well for most of it until this past week. There were
But did they? Did they play incredibly well?
They did.
All season?
Yeah, I mean, early on they had issues, but how many weeks in a row did they have to go to have that record that they had? out of 6.
Oh,
What, half the year they had a little bit of an issue early in the first half, and then in
I
the
don't know.
last
I'd
3
have
weeks
to
they
get
were
out my
great.
calculator.
Yeah, so I mean,
But
it's they still played incredibly well for a while until this week.
I don't know, dude. I'm looking at they had not really. I mean, go back and go look at their season. It's a lot of red. There's a lot of red.
They struggled early, and then they hit their now they hit
early?
a streak.
Well, what's early? I mean, what do you define as
The
early?
first 3 weeks, the first 2-3 weeks.
First 3.
Remember your thing, dude. Remember your first 3 week thing.
Yeah, no, you're right. But they won 3 games in week 4, so.
So, but they still went on a string.
They had 2 good weeks, 5 and 6, really good weeks, 5 and 6. You had 2 amazing weeks. If only the season was a little bit shorter. How about that?
Well, we all know that's your favorite team to sit on, so.
No, I mean, I got nothing against Hartford. I really don't. I have nothing against them. They're not in my division. Even if they were, I have nothing against them. Thumbs up, guys. Good job.
Now, if you want to make the point that week 4 is something to look at because, they went 3-6. They played a lot of Western teams, a lot of good teams. Okay, lost to Tucson, Ontario, Texas, Stockton, San Diego, and then lost to Syracuse as well that past week. That is a sign of, okay, yeah, they went on a string the next couple of weeks, but look back at week 4 when they played a lot of good quality teams. How did they fare? And you want to make a case that week 4 is more of a harbinger of what they're really capable of. Absolutely. Week 3, the same thing. Look at the competition and how they fared against them. Lost to Hershey, lost to Rochester, Binghamton, Bridgeport barely, and then lost to Providence as well. So again, the case that I think you need to make is look at the other weeks when they played quality teams, because I think in that stretch they played some teams that had either weren't playing well at the time, had ECU issues at the time. I think they hit a string. They got lucky. The dice rolled their way for 2 weeks really, really well. That's why I still think they're a good team, but I think they went on that big string because they were hitting everything perfectly right for those 2 weeks. I think that's the case to be made.
Look, I'm honest. I'm an honest person. They beat our team. They beat maybe our best line, arguably our best line at full strength. 1-0. They beat us.
Yep.
All right. Look, I'll take a look. Listen, when I lose and everything like that, I admit it 100%. They beat our team at full strength. They needed Sally with the big chest in the front row, and Tinkerbell, and fucking Peter Pan, and Captain Hook, and whoever else, Yogi Berra, for all I know, was helping them out to win that game. But they beat us, and they had a really great run. And I mean, I don't want to be the dead horse here, but
okay,
that's all it was, and I don't know how else to say it, really. I guess I've said everything I can.
No,
really.
I think we we just
snap,
got to
snap back to reality. Oops, there goes gravity.
We got a
jeez,
wow, showing your age again. All right, so let's move on to the Eastern North, because I think everyone's now we're going to get blamed for talking about Hartford too much.
Yeah, well, they're not good. Okay, I'm sorry. I can't resist. Every time you say Hartford, I just automatically not good. Sorry.
Oh boy. How about the Eastern North? And we'll take a look at the divisional stats again. Eastern North with the Marlies on top, as you see, 91 points, 5 ahead of Syracuse. Back on top now, Toronto. Binghamton 2 back of the Crunch. And then the Utica Comets, now winning 8 in a row, are back in it. We'll talk with them. We'll talk about them in a bit. Rockford needs a miracle. They need Utica to hit a Hartford-like streak to get back into this one. Albany had a good week, 6-3-1. They made some moves, and the guys played well this week. Glad to see that happen. And St. John's is there as well. But let's talk more about what Toronto did to get back up on top. 8-1 week 7, 6-0 in divisional games this week. And you know what? If you're going to be a winner and you're going to take your division, you've got to be able to do that when these weeks happen. 6.3 goals per game. what I don't know what else you really need to say about the Marlies. We know the level of talent on that team, and they've had some moments here and there where they've struggled a little bit, but they always wind up coming right back into it. And again, another solid team from top to bottom. Mr. Don has done a heck of a job as GM there, kept the train running, got a lot of talented players on this team, and good goaltending all around, obviously, with Mello back and Watermelon there. Hard to say that they can't beat Hershey if they wind up meeting him in the finals. They got to get past their division first, and Binghamton could be a problem. Syracuse is still there, but the Marlies, I'm thinking right now, vibes, the favorite to come out. How satisfied are you that they're going to be the team to come out of the East and North? Vibes.
Well,
Did we lose?
Oh,
him?
I'm sorry. What was the question? I missed that. I
Oh
apologize.
my God! Were you eating again?
No, I don't know. So what was the question? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I really hope that's what you were doing. Toronto. Toronto on a 6-game winning streak right now. Not far ahead of Syracuse or Binghamton.
I heard all that part. Yeah, you're talking about Toronto.
What do what's your percentage of confidence?
Are they the class of the division? Are they the class of the division is what you're asking?
Well, give me a percentage of what you think of their chances of coming out of the East or North.
Pretty good. I mean, they're a solid team, top to bottom.
I did ask for a percentage, didn't I, Dead Soul?
Percentage. I mean, most percentages are made up on the spot anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
it's called a friggin' podcast. Give me some goddamn numbers.
65%.
You know what's funny?
You know what?
You know what's funny? That's
67.
the number I was thinking, actually.
67%.
Okay.
What's that?
So
0.8. 67.8.
Okay.
Well, they certainly had an excellent week, as you kind of pointed out already. They actually scored 57 goals this week in the 9 games that they had there. It was that's pretty incredible. I mean, they had back-to-back games where they went. One was like 11-0 versus the Pens on Tuesday, and then they went 9-1 versus the Devils the next day. That's just that's the kind of offense you need. And they have been like that pretty much all season. Well, not the 11 and 9 goals each game, but I mean, they've been a good 4 or 5 goals pretty steadily throughout the season. And, I think they're still that team that's going to be tough to beat. I think for any of these teams in any of the divisions, I know that, there's certain good teams like, the Moose have in fact beat them. And I think, they've had.
What was that? What was the team? I didn't hear that. Say it again. What team?
Yeah, the Moose.
Oh, the Moose. Okay.
The Moose. What did they did? They defeated Cleveland and Toronto, and I'm sure
who they beat.
That.
Who they beat? Who was that?
We'll get to that when we get to that division. I know
we'll
be talking all about
I'm
that.
I'm sorry, good.
But yeah, I mean, we all know that the Marlies have been and are a very strong team, and moving forward, it's going to be a pretty tough battle for the Crunch to try and take that spot from them. I really don't. At this point, before I would say that they probably had a good chance of taking that spot, but with the week that they had where, they had an okay week with the Crunch there, but they need to have a better week than that to be able to catch up and maintain that position, especially when they have Binghamton right behind them by just 2 points. So, both those teams are going to have to step it up this next week, the last 2 weeks here. And I just don't see at this point Marlies slipping from that top spot.
I kind of agree with them. Syracuse is good, though.
Oh yeah, not to take anything away from
them.
They're
good,
but they got to have a really, really, really good next 2 weeks and hope that the Marlies, kind of taper off a little bit and not have a huge week like they did this last week.
Yeah,
I think.
Shout out to Vesna.
Yeah,
see Vesna, the shout box.
He's back down now. No,
Vesna.
he's up.
He's back down.
No, he's up.
Is he up?
He's up and
He's up.
Their logos look similar.
NHL. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he's up.
He
in the
should be
NHL.
up. He is in NHL.
Yeah,
He should be. He's good.
I told Moose that would be the only reason
Very.
why he'd be the best goalie in the league because Vez got called up.
Yeah. I played him in versus online versus the other day, and I beat him.
Nice.
That doesn't tell the full story.
Nobody
though.
cares really.
But I did beat him.
The Crunch, it's funny you mention them. They, again, losing out in taking over first place. The Marlies now back on top in the Crunch there. Again, plenty of talent, but again, I with Toronto's goaltending, I think that's where they have an advantage right now over the Crunch. I like DC Lumpy a lot. And Slatter, I don't know much about, but has played fairly well this season. But the way Watermelon and Mello have played all year, again, if Mello stays the course the next few weeks and is a rock in the playoffs, that's where I think Toronto has the advantage.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I think even more than that, even outside of their goaltending net, they have the better defense as well, Toronto. And if this team ever did go head-to-head with Syracuse, Syracuse versus Toronto, while the Syracuse forwards are good, I think they lack not only in goaltending but also defense. So, overall, I think Toronto's the class of this division. I'd agree with that.
Meanwhile, we still have Utica on the rise, going 8-1 this week, 5-1 in the division, 8 straight wins now. We mentioned some of the players who've played well so far. Rochester having a little bit of a slide this weekend as well. We've talked about Binghamton. Again, I think these teams are the ones who, if they can catch Toronto somehow or figure them out or figure out Syracuse, they're teams that have a chance to maybe be in the finals of the division, but they're teams that have to figure out how to beat good defense and good goaltending from the upper echelon of that division. But Utica, give them some credit for coming back and playing well this week.
Yeah, and you want to know something? I don't mean to. I don't want Binghamton to take this the wrong way. You know what? I have fallen into the tendency of fluffing things that I say just a little tiny bit because people are sensitive in this league. So I don't want Binghamton to take this the wrong way, but if I was going to pick a team that's not Toronto and not Syracuse, it would actually be Utica as opposed to Binghamton. I think Utica is a real solid traditional dark horse style team, and I think that they can make some noise come playoffs. I mean, you said it yourself, Sid, so yeah. I'd agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the Central. Western Central, of course, we only are allowed 10 seconds tops to talk about the Monsters. So they went 8-1.
Monsters.
They went 8-1, and their one loss, a shutout loss, to the Manitoba Moose this week, who also went 8-1, who lost their one game to a stunning performance by the Wolves goaltender in a 7-3 Chicago win.
Mr. Sibbs himself, who actually, what'd you have? You had a 81.3% save percentage, 16 shots on net.
Yeah, it was. You know what? It was a fun game to play. We had a blast. I'm the only regret is that, Vibes got scared and backed out of the game, and
of course, he backed out of your game. He backed out of Moose's game.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on here.
He's afraid of
us.
Seems
to be a pattern.
He's afraid of Hershey Bears goaltenders from season 4. I think that's his problem.
Yeah,
that's the problem he has. Yeah,
it's got nothing to do with anything else. I promise.
No. So let's talk more about your Moose. Second place, 5 points over Iowa. The combined opposing record this week for the Moose: 289, 232, and 45. So, again, you guys played some tremendous opponents, 6 out of the 9 over 500 with their records. And you guys had a nice week, again, taking over second, hitting the prophecy of Vibes that he would take over.
Like I said, I would, yes, of course.
So,
I hate that he's always right.
Don't
for
you
the
hate
fourth
it?
time.
It's got to be annoying. It's got to be really
Well,
annoying. I
I'm
mean,
sure it's a
honestly,
heavy burden for you to carry too.
yeah.
Exactly.
No, it's got to be. It's got to be hard. Dealing with someone who is right all the time. It's got to be annoying.
Yeah, it's called my wife.
Um. Yeah. I mean, again, like I said, told you guys last Sunday that we'd be in second that night, and we were. We probably should have beat Chicago, but I mean, you can't discredit them. They played a good game, and they exposed our weaknesses, and were able to take it to us and win that game. Other than that, we had a pretty solid week. I'm a realist, and I will say that from what I've heard, and I would agree with this. I would concur with this assessment that we did beat the Monsters, probably third line. I have heard from a few people within their team that was their worst line and weakest line, and I would agree with that ultimately. They're a good line too, and we threw out a pretty strong line. It wasn't even to beat them in particular. Um, Excuse me, but it was, it just so happened that was their availability, so that's how it ended up. And we were able to beat them. We were able to beat Iowa. We beat pretty much the entire division except for Sibs and his clan. And it was a good week. And I mean, it's about time that maybe. Listen, I feel like the Moose have been ignored all season, and I'm perfectly okay with it. We've been kind of overlooked, ignored, kind of the redheaded stepchild of the league, I guess you would say. We're not getting the respect we deserve. We haven't all season. You look at the All-Star voting, my players aren't getting the respect that they deserve.
Hmm.
You look at my defense, I feel like any of these guys could have been nominated for the All-Star game. Every single forward on the team, aside from myself, probably could have been nominated. And we have some lines really clicking. We have Go Hawks, Nylander, and Louis, which is clicking really well. I've been pairing them up with Beal and P Swag on defense, and they play together often, and they're starting to develop some chemistry. So we got that going. Then we have the Timmy Z line and Sessman, and they're absolutely knocking the cover off the ball.
Hmm.
They've been switching up between Junior and Mafia Man, and when Mafia Man's on that line, it's maybe the strongest line in the entire AHL. I mean, even with Junior, it's still a significant line. And then you have myself going with Bear and either Mafia or Junior, depending on availability. But overall, it's a really good team, and I think we're starting to hit our stride right now. Kind of like I was just saying, this is
Right.
when you should be hitting your stride, and I think we are.
You mentioned you mentioned all the big players on your team, Timmy Z, uh, Louis 222, 17-1-1, 33 goals, 24 assists, a plus 29 on the season. This is a guy who hasn't played since he played for you, I think, in season one,
Yep.
correct?
Yeah. I had him in season one.
So where
I
so
had him 2 seasons over in VG, and now back here again.
so where was he in LG for all this time? Did he have an issue with LG or
He was
time
just
or what?
playing. He plays with me. Is basically what it is. So he was playing with me over in VG.
Okay. And so he has just put up tremendous numbers this past week. 3-0, 3 goals, 4 assists, a +6.
Yeah.
Just again, I have you went down the whole line. Pitch, P Swag a +8 on defense. 3-0
Yep.
this week. Just getting and of course you get goaltenders Domi and Arch. Again, Domi 84.7 save percentage,
Domi is
4.7,
lights out too. He's really good,
1.72
Domi.
goals against, and again,
Yeah.
that's and believe me, we've seen Arch play in the playoffs.
Yeah.
He's clutch, and that's another good goaltender to have there. And
Yeah.
looks like you've got a lot
Yes,
of the pieces.
you're welcome, by the way, for that. There,
Yeah,
you're
well,
very
no, I
welcome.
mean, listen, hey, Cookie Boy, I told you last week that I give you a lot of credit for this team, and I couldn't do it without you.
No,
And I make sure that everybody knows that, and everyone understands the fact that a lot of times, when an AHL team succeeds, a lot of times it starts at the top, and Dead Soul's at the top of this organization. And if it wasn't for him, I don't know how good we'd be doing. Um, uh, but that being said, I think the real credit goes to the players, and yeah, the team has been good. I mean, it's a lot of really solid players. Louis is phenomenal. He's arguably the best player on the team. But at the same time, so is Mafia, so is Gohawk, so is Timmy. They're all arguably the best players on the team. Sessman, and that's the thing. The team has a lot of depth, and a lot of defensive depth. And I got P Swag and J Beal. They play. They're kind of like offensive defensemen, and they seem to be working out with Gohawks. And then the goalies, Domi's lights out. And Dead Soul allows us to add Arch to that, and it's a good team. It's a solid team, and I think we could continue this onward.
Other than obviously Cleveland ahead of you, you just hopped over Iowa. Grand Rapids has played well all season long, and the Checkers are not going away necessarily. Who are you worried? Leave Cleveland out of this because I think Cleveland's a concern for anybody in that division. Who else are you worried about? What's one of the team in this division that you have concern for?
Everyone.
Really?
Everyone. Every single team. I think me taking any one of these teams in my division lightly would be a foolish maneuver. I do think that Iowa's got a lot of talent, and we beat them Sunday, but, a few bounces this way, a few bounces that way, and, who knows the outcome of that game. Same thing with Cleveland, and we played their third line, which is, as I'm told from them, their weak line. And, they could have, they were a solid team. Sure, we only gave up 4 shots, but they were a very good line. And, they had to work for their 4 shots. And, they could be a problem. That team could be a problem. I know you said not to really talk about them, but I have to.
Sure.
Grand Rapids, they're another team. They're very solid throughout their lineup. Sure, they're a little top heavy and they lack a little bit on defense, but overall they're a solid team. And, any team in that division, really, any team in that division. I couldn't really say that I'm more worried about one team or the other, and that's including Cleveland. I lump Cleveland in with the rest of them. They're all really good.
Let's head on now to the Western Pacific. San Jose still on top there, and still the team that has to be overtaken at this point. As you see, the Barracuda 87 points. 1 over Ontario, who have had a decent week, 8-1-1 for the Reign in their past 10 on a 3-game winning streak, and just one back of San Jose. The Gulls and Texas now tied at 75 points, and Stockton 2 points behind them right there. So again, this Western Pacific is going to be another tough division. It will not be easy for any of these teams to take over anybody else, and we're in another situation where it's going to be, down to the last week or two. I think we're going to have another Western Pacific battle like we did last season.
Yeah, it's another division. I tell you, man, throughout the league, and it just so happens that, the Eastern Atlantic, maybe some weaker teams, but they're still close. But it's throughout the entire league, man. It's just close all around. San Diego jumps Texas this week, so they've moved into the 3rd slot.
Right.
Stockton's fallen a little bit to 5th, but they're still only 2 points out of a playoff spot. And, ultimately will definitely make a bid for getting in. But this division's tight too, man. It's tight. Got 2 really solid teams up at the top with San Jose and Ontario. It's really good division, good hockey.
Dead Soul, another, it's interesting. It was all in division for the West. Stockton going 3-6 on the week, and the wins coming against San Antonio. They beat Texas by 1 and beat Grand Rapids in the last game of the week, but they had a tough week within their division, and then having to play Grand Rapids, Manitoba outside of your division. making it very tough where the Moose beat them 2-1. So we saw Stockton rising, and they're ebbing and flowing this season. They really weren't doing that in season 4, but they they look like they're going to be consistent, and all of a sudden they have a week like they did in week 7, and things are a little shaky for them, and they're still fighting to try and get into that last spot, and it's not so easy than it was last year.
It's looking, yeah, it's really, it's always interesting to see a team like that kind of have their struggles after such a successful season last season, especially with some of the returning players that they had. And I mean, they have a few of them, obviously, some key players. So I mean, they're still in the run and in the hunt, at least for this 3rd or 4th spot. Um, it's interesting that they're in this predicament, but I think they could very well catch up and maybe grab the 4th spot. These other 2 teams of the Gulls and the Stars have been doing really well as of late as well, and it's going to be hard to kind of gauge how this is going to end. But I mean, all of them have a huge task at hand when they, I guess they're visiting. I just had it written down somewhere here. I think they visit the Eastern Atlantic, or no, sorry. Is it?
Yeah, Eastern Atlantic. Yeah, they've got Providence, Hartford, Lehigh Valley, Hershey, Bridgeport. So, and they've got a couple of games out of that division with Chicago. So, I mean, this is kind of the week, I think, where Stockton better make some good ground this week. They need at least a 6-3 week. Week 9, they go right back at Iowa, Cleveland, Bakersfield, who's no pushover, Ontario, Tucson, San Jose, Texas, and then San Diego. They finish with Bakersfield and San Antonio, but they're going to have a rough week 9. They better make some movement next week.
They got to steal the points next week. They got to be the ones who can try and go 9-0 if they can, or at least 8-1 or something, and really hope the other teams have a little bit of tough time against those teams. So it's a defining week for them. It's going to be a big test in that regard, and to see if they can jump that spot and kind of keep that spot. If they can get to the 3rd spot, hopefully for them, or at least the 4th, that would be great. But they're only a couple points behind from that. It's still a stretch for them. They got to maintain it after that. And these other teams are just as hungry as they are, and they're also good teams. So it's this is gonna be interesting to watch. I can't really give you a solidified a prediction of what I think is going to happen. I can't say for sure that they're actually going to finish in the 4th or 3rd spot at all. I'm not even sure if they're going to be in the playoffs this season. So they've got a lot to play for right now, and if they really want that and want to have a chance to kind of go back and get a second win at the Cup there, then they're going to have to really put everything forward this week, and just they got to win every game. That's it.
No pressure.
No pressure, no. They got to win, though. They got to win them all, and they got to win a lot more than these other guys ahead of them.
No pressure, but if you lose, you die.
Yeah.
So, again, 2 more weeks left to go. Week 8 coming up here now. And, again, a lot of teams at this point, really, every game is a tremendously important one for quite a few of these teams who are on the bubble, who may still have a last gasp. I think we kind of feel that a little bit in Chicago. We need a run if we're going to have a prayer at anything for the playoffs. We let some games get away from us last week that, we could have won, should have won. And you can't afford any of those anymore. And as management, I mean, isn't that kind of the message you have to get across to everybody, Vibes?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Chicago management deserves a little bit of credit. Because, when the season started, I mean, they were totally fucking the dog, and they've turned it around, and they've made themselves respectable. They've made some really good moves, and I mean, they're in the hunt here. I mean, were we talking about Chicago? I feel like we're talking about Chicago, right? I'm not completely having an Alzheimer's moment here.
Well, no, I just mentioned it's one of those teams that
Okay, right.
really
Yeah.
needs to do something big this week in order to
Yeah,
stay in the
they
race.
do, and I mean they can still make it. I mean they're only what is it? 8 points? 12 points out. What is it?
We're
9 points.
9 points
9 points
out.
out.
Yeah, 9 points
Yeah.
away from the Griffins, and we've had some issues with them. Charlotte's been a problem. Luckily, they've hit a bit of a skid, but
Yeah.
a lot of teams
Yeah, but
hovering around
Chicago's
500.
not out of this by any means. You
Yeah.
know.
And again, another team like Utica, if they're gonna stay there, and they probably will. I don't think Rochester's going to catch up to them. It's certainly possible, but they would need, the Americans would need a lot of help again. But Utica needs to keep this going. Like you said, we're in the last few weeks. You've got to be at your best game, and you've got to continue to keep the play up and not start not peak after this past week and start heading downhill, because that's
Yep.
how many teams we see back into the playoffs who wind up not being all that successful. I think what's odd is your Moose last year kind of did that a little bit and still put up a damn good fight in that first round, but that's not typical of a team that kind of backs into the playoffs.
Yeah. Wait, his moose, or my moose?
His Moose, not your Moose.
His moose. Yeah, his moose.
Yeah, I only caught some of what you said there. Sorry.
Is nobody listening to me, or is that, or do we have a technical issue? I feel like I'm talking to my wife here. Nobody's listening at all. The cats listen more than you guys do.
Sweetie.
All right, let's wrap this shebang up and just talk about Week 8. Again, what does management tell their players at this point? What do you tell them? Vibes, win or die? Is that the message right now?
No, not really. My team is my message to my team is you guys are the best team in the entire league. Don't fuck it up. That's my message.
Good motivation speech.
Is that
skate or die?
Is that dead? Is that Dead Soul approved?
Well,
Yeah,
whether it is or not.
No,
That's still my
I'm rooting for them.
message.
I'm rooting for them. They're a great team.
Yeah.
They've been helpful for us when they've ECU'd and given us some nice wins against some tough teams. Even no, they're a great bunch of guys, and I guess the Cancer Ward team seems to have actually.
How about my boys coming up there? What was it, Thursday? 4-0, right?
Yeah,
How about that?
Yeah, they took on. They also. I think not to take anything away from them, but yeah, they took on Chicago actually, quite a good team, and I don't remember if there was. I have to look back to see if there's any ECUs for them, but yeah, we had like basically an entire team of ECUs of the Moose, and they just destroyed, a really tough team in Chicago. But so thank you for all you guys who came out to that and helped actually have us win a big game. And even though it's unfortunately too late for us to really make it matter, it's always appreciated when guys come and step up and not only do well and actually come last second and last minute like they did, but also to be.
It was nice to watch too. I was watching it. I was like a proud dad.
Yeah,
I was like, "Hey, boys, there you go."
You couldn't ask for anything better especially when you have to get a bunch of people to just last minute come up like that. So that's greatly appreciated.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen.
Before we go, I was just going to make a quick little shout out to some goalies here, because I think it's time to do a little bit of, giving a little recognition to some of these guys. I know I've done it a little earlier in the season too, but I kind of want to quickly go over just the top kind of 5 guys, if that's okay, if you don't mind me giving these guys the recognition I think that they deserve.
Sure.
I mean, this list I compiled pretty quickly in the last little bit. I mean, I might have missed some names, and I think there's a lot of good goalies out there, and I think ultimately we just have it's hard to kind of really pinpoint the exact best ones or top ones, but some of these guys really stand out for the team, so I'm going to give them a real quick shout out. So first of all, number 1, I'd have to say Tyler Loki. I know you might think I'm biased, but I mean the guy's had an 82.6 save percentage for the season, one of the best in the league, period. And that's on a team that has struggled all season, like I mentioned earlier, and he's faced 706 shots. 706. That's more than everybody else. And like 40 games, of course, he played as well.
He's
with a
been leading the
2.91.
league. He's been leading the league in shots against for most of the season, I think.
I think he pretty much does almost every season. It seems like
Yeah,
he just always seems to face a lot of shots, but also be the guy that's able to handle it and do such a great job.
He does.
Big shout out to you there, Tyler Loki, because that's a pretty big accomplishment, especially on a team that I know defensively sometimes isn't always at their top of their game for you. So, and that's speaking on my own personal experience with it, because I know that we had that issue. Next would be with 32 games played. Oh, sorry, no, I'm going around here. Next would be 34 games played. Musapotamus. Again, not trying to be biased here, but Musapotamus, there's a shout out to you. 82.6 save percentage. Same as Tyler Loki, with only 516 shots against and 2.57 goals against average. So congrats there to you, Moose. You've been having a really good year, of course, on a very, very good team. But yes,
he's behind Tyler, which is where he belongs.
Yes, I mean, he did only play 34 games to Tyler's 40, so that's why I put him there.
Right.
And third, I put Headhunter at 82.2% with 628 shots, 2.8 goals against average. That's for the Sound Tigers. And after that, I'd put Custom at third, or Costom, however you want to say
Costom,
it. Costom. 32 games played, 81.4 save percentage, 409 shots, 2.37 goals against average. That's for the Sens there. So keep up the good work there as well. And fifth, but not least at all, because he's an amazing goalie, but he's also on a friggin' amazing team, Maximus at 82.4%. 391 shots, so he's seen the least shots of all these teams. That's why I also put him in fifth there, with 2.27 goals against average for the Monsters. And I will have to at least give an honorable mention to Navy Nick as well as
sure,
Watermelon,
absolutely,
because those guys have been phenomenal for their teams as well. But I just wanted to give those little shout outs to those guys.
Very nice. Goaltender love.
Got to give a little bit, right? We always talk about a lot of the skaters, and we talk about some of the goaltenders, but I think,
Vibes doesn't give a shit about the goaltenders.
Dead Soul's so nice when he does it. I feel like he's giving out lollipops.
Well, it's the hardest position in this game.
You get a lollipop?
Everybody gets 5 gold stars, but yeah. The thing is, it's the toughest role, I think, in this game. They take the most heat a lot of the time. They get the worst kind of goals scored against them, the most unfair situations where they can't cover pucks, or you get bad bounces that are just ridiculous. You know how hard it is to be a goalie, Sibs.
Sure.
It's just a huge pain in the ass. And I think the odds are ultimately stacked against you a lot of the time when it comes to the glitchiness of the game. So for these guys to be in a league like this and put themselves out there to stand around and watch everybody else play, and then obviously make their big saves when they can, that's a huge kudos to those guys that do that. You're all very patient people to be able to do that, but also very good at your craft. So congrats to all of you.
Shout out to Domi, the real best goalie in the league.
Oh, absolutely. I shouldn't have forgotten that, but I was trying not to be super biased, and you know what? There's somebody I did miss. That's a huge miss for me, and I'm sorry, Domi. And it looks like for him, like he has an 81.6% save percentage with a 2.33 goals against average. That's pretty enormous too.
You want to know something? The reason why his save percentage is that low, and mind you, it's an 81, and I'm saying that low, it's because he's just been hit with these really weird EA games once in a while where he just can't stop anything because the puck just goes in over and over and over again. But I mean, this guy has posted over a 900 save percentage multiple times this year.
Yeah, you know what? I'm sorry, that's a huge miss, because I mean, again, he played exceptional for us when he's played for us, and he is a great goalie, and absolutely he belongs on that list. I probably missed a few other guys out there. I apologize to all of you guys. I didn't mention Vezina because obviously he's up in the NHL. We all know he's good, but everybody, yeah, great job.
Domi gets a lollipop too.
He gets 10 of them.
When Dead Soul, when you're done with the show, do you take your sneakers off and put your shoes back on, and take your sweater off and put your jacket back on, and
like Mr. Rogers?
Mr. Rogers, because you are the Mr. Rogers of this show for sure.
Well,
he's definitely so nice. He really is. He's got a nice voice too.
In this neighborhood, and you know what? By the way, Vibes, just to say something now, it is a sunny evening right now. Okay, it's 8:25 here, and it's a very beautifully sunny evening It's about 32 degrees, so there are sunny evenings.
Shit, that's
Actually,
cold.
the sun doesn't go down until 10:30 at night here. So
10:30 at night.
yeah, we don't have giant, tall buildings blocking the sun out 24/7 and
Neither
smog.
do we, but we have the horizon that blocks the sun out.
Hold on a second. Wait
Yeah.
a minute. When you say 32, you're talking Celsius, right? Because
Yes.
yeah, we don't do
Yes.
that.
I was gonna
shit.
say it's awfully
Fair
fucking
enough.
cold.
We don't do that
32.
shit here. So speak American.
Yes, I gotta remember
Speak
that.
American.
Whole different system.
They tried to teach us that shit back in the early '80s. Remember, well, Vibes was younger than me, but they tried to teach us that, saying it was going to happen, and basically, I think what the entire school system worth of kids said was, "Go fuck yourself. We're not learning it."
Well, I'll tell you what, it makes a hell of a lot more sense than our
Oh, sure it
system.
does. Of
But that's a
course it
whole
does.
different discussion.
Yeah, exactly. All right, are we done? We're talking about temperatures here, and it's time to get the fuck off the air. I think.
I don't know.
Enjoy the
I'm
weather.
feeling a little clingy to you guys. I don't want to go.
Please,
Okay.
please don't feel
I guess
clingy.
so.
Nobody wants to hang around with you for the entire night.
Oh,
I think we know that.
whatever.
I think you know that too,
Go
don't you?
fly a kite, would you?
Oh, the calmer, the kinder, gentler Vibes, who's trying not to curse.
Yeah.
All right. I think that just about does it for us. We are glad you folks were able to tune in tonight and listen to the show, and hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back for Week 8 next week, and hopefully this coming Thursday we'll get a game on live for you. The last couple of weeks there are going to be some good ones, so we'll hopefully have Thursday Night Hockey running this Thursday. So for Vibes and Dead Soul, thank you guys for joining again. Appreciate it.
Thank you again as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
You've been listening
All
to
right.
AHLPSN this week, and this is T-Sip saying so long. We'll talk to you again next week.